Is ProWritingAid a good grammar checker? And what should you know if you're going to use this tool to edit your writing? Hi there, my name is Brian Collins. Welcome to the Become a Writer Today channel. So I've tested ProWritingAid on and off for a number of years. And in this updated ProWritingAid video review, I'm going to explain exactly what it does and how you can potentially use it to edit your writing. And I'm also going to compare it to a number of other competitors that are out there. Hope you enjoyed this ProWritingAid review. If you do, hit thumbs up. And if you want to get more reviews of writing apps, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel. ProWritingAid is basically a popular grammar checker that you can use to find and fix errors in your writing. It also has some additional tools for improving the readability of your work, for managing citations, and even for plagiarism checks. Now, it's popular with lots of different types of writers, some of whom are called out on the site, including creative writers, those who work, education, teachers, and so on. However, I found it's particularly good for writers who need access to advanced writing reports. I'll show you an example of those in a moment. And it's also particularly good for those who write fiction. It's also a good grammar checker if you're looking for something that's more powerful than what you'll get with your operating system, but perhaps you want something that's still quite affordable. ProWritingAid is free to try, but the free version is quite limited. So you can only check 500 words, which is far less than the length of a typical book chapter, article, or blog post. You also get access to a bare bones version of the app. So to use it, you're really going to have to take out a premium version subscription. So if you take out an annual subscription, that's going to cost you $10 per month, billed annually, which works out at $120. And then you get access to all of the premium features. If you're not down for paying a yearly subscription and saving 50%, then you can just pay $20 per month. Now, in comparison to some other grammar checkers, that's quite cheap, so it's relatively affordable. For example, Grammarly may cost you $30 per month. There are free grammar checkers out there that you can use too, but you're not going to get access to all of these features. For example, for citations, for plagiarism checks, and so on. That brings me to the other feature within ProWritingAid that you must pay for, which is the plagiarism checker. These are billed in addition to your premium subscription. So you basically purchase credits for the plagiarism checker. So you may need to spend $5 or $10 to check several thousand words for plagiarism. So do factor that in as well. It is quite common for grammar checkers and plagiarism checkers to include or to charge an additional fee for this feature. You can use ProWritingAid via the web app, the desktop app, or via plugins for Google Docs, Microsoft Word, and a number of other apps. So I'm going to focus on the web app firstly before showing you some of the other apps. So when you open up ProWritingAid, you just log into your account. First thing you're going to do is just click on settings and make sure you've selected the right English for your region or for your country. I wrote an article before recording this review and I'm going to just paste this in rather than upload it. Once I paste it in, ProWritingAid will just take a second to scan the article for issues. Now I can fix these in a number of different ways. So perhaps the easiest way to do it is just simply to click on when it's underlined in blue and in red. So the problem isn't finding a good idea, or the problems isn't finding a good idea. So ProWritingAid is saying I should change this to R. The problems aren't finding a good idea or a means of expression for your voice. Probably still a little bit clumsy, so I may need to do some. So for the purposes of this review, I went ahead and wrote an article with some deliberate grammar and spelling errors. Rather than uploading it, I'm just going to simply paste it into the web app. ProWritingAid will just take a second to scan it for issues. Now I can fix them in several different ways. So perhaps the easiest way is just simply to click on what it's underlined. Here's the first error. I spend a lots of time considering. So this should be a lot. So I should just simply accept this change and apply it. Next up. The problems aren't finding a good idea or a means of expression for your voice and talents. Yeah, maybe that could be okay, but I'd probably be better off rewriting this altogether than accepting the ProWritingAid suggestion. And actually it's missing the letter N as well. So let me just change this to aren't and see what ProWritingAid suggests. So it seems to think that this is okay. But as a writer, I may want to improve the readability of this via some copy edits. Here's the next one. It can take years and a series to see fruition in the form of an engaged readership. Now that reads fine, but ProWritingAid is saying I can improve the readability by changing this to as. Now again, I can disable this rule if I feel it's not relevant in the article, or I can just ignore this if I feel that this is incorrect. But in this case, I think it's okay, so I'm going to click accept. So you can see I can work through my document one by one, making these changes. And because ProWritingAid is a rich text editor, I can also apply formatting and so on. The other way I can work through the edits is just simply to use the right-hand sidebar. Now this works a bit different to other grammar checkers, so they're organized by reports rather than by issue. So rather than seeing individual grammar errors, if I click on grammar and spelling, it will reload the web app for a second, and then it will tell me that it'll give me a percentage score. It'll tell me there are 4 spelling issues and 6 grammar issues. And I can just navigate to these by clicking on this arrow and decide what I want to fix or ignore. So in summary, this is the report that you should look at if you just simply want to edit something quickly and easily prior to publication. Then you can work through the additional reports if you feel you need a bit more help. So I'm just going to click X and I'm going to go back to this. Next, I'm going to click on style. Now this is determined by the style that I set for the article in question. And this is where ProWritingAid again is different to other grammar checkers. So the writing style is really a question for you, the writer, and also depends on where you're writing this or where you're going to publish your article. So it's saying that there are some repeated sentence starts. So these aren't necessarily grammar errors, but it just could be a bit clumsy to read aloud. So I may need to decide if I want to rewrite these sentences. And it's actually giving me some suggestions that I could apply as well. So I need to ask myself, is this going to change the tone of my work? Next up, it's saying there are some long subordinate clauses. So I'm going to navigate to this to see what this is all about. Long subordinate clause. Consider moving the main clause forward. So it's saying that this sentence here, I worked as a copywriter for a British software company for much of my 30s. So it's not actually giving me a change that I should make. So I would actually just have to go in and figure out what way I should word this sentence so it reads a little bit better. However, it is highlighting the next sentence and saying that I have started 4 sentences in a row with the same word. So I do need to make some decisions as the writer about what to do versus ignore. It's quite good at finding instances of the passive voice. I was invited. So in this case, I should change this to they invited me. So you can see the change here. My review ranked and they invited me into their affiliate program rather than I was invited. If I decide this isn't relevant, I can just undo it at any time. And so you can see that I could work through these stylistic changes one by one to decide what makes sense. Now, usually I just focus on readability enhancements and perhaps instances of the passive voice. I mean, you can spend quite a long time copy editing something, so it really does depend on, what you're writing or for and also who it's for. There are some additional reports. So for example, sentence length will tell me about the length of individual sentences. This may or may not be relevant. If you're writing for the web, you're probably going to want to have short sentences just to improve the readability of your work. So here's one long sentence, 27 words. Wow, that's quite long. So I may want to shorten this particular sentence if I feel 27 words is too much. Let me see if I can find another one. 16 words. It's actually just a PS, so this was copy for an email. And in this case, I think that this is okay. So I'm going to leave that. Now I'm going to click X and look at another ProWritingAid report. So you can see here there is a one around readability. So I do spend quite a bit of time looking at the readability report. And it's telling me that it's easy to read based on the Flesch-Kincaid grade and some other readability indexes. Now this perhaps brings me to one of the strengths of ProWritingAid and perhaps one of its weaknesses. So it's great to have all this information and metrics about reading time, readability, so on hard versus easy to read paragraphs. But it can also be a little bit overwhelming to have all of these different types of scores. To be honest, you don't really need to know what your score is for all of these different metrics. It's just enough to know that it's easy to read. And perhaps the same could be said for the different reports. You don't necessarily need to go in and go through every single report here. I would just focus on the first 2 reports. Otherwise, it can get a little bit overwhelming and you can actually get bogged down in the editing process. Once you've fixed your grammar and spelling errors in a document, next you should use the improvements tab to see what you can potentially fix. Now this works quite well, but I have noticed there's a few little issues or quirks with it. So firstly, just make sure you set the document to whatever it is that you're writing, as I mentioned previously. So this is actually a newsletter that I was going to send to an email list. So I've set it to general. And you can see there are 22 improvements, but interestingly, there are not 22 improvements in the sidebar for me to click on. It's only when I scroll down that more of them start to appear. So I guess it could get a little bit confusing, or I could potentially miss some of these. If I change this from general to creative, general non-fiction, ProWritingAid will take a few seconds to rescan the document and it should find some additional improvements. So you can see the number here is still going up. It's at 20, 21. So you can see, or 21 versus 22. So slightly less improvements once I changed it to creative. So again, that's another way that you can copy edit your work quickly and easily in ProWritingAid, with the caveat that this does seem to change quite a bit. So personally, I just prefer to edit directly in the article rather than using the right-hand sidebar for that reason. ProWritingAid offers a desktop app that you can use on Mac or Windows. And basically with the desktop app, you can open any file, including Scrivener project files, which is excellent. I haven't seen this in any other grammar checker. Text files, HTML files, Markdown files, Word, open documents, and final draft. You can also create documents in ProWritingAid and write directly. So I'm going to go ahead and create a document. I'm just going to click Markdown, click Create, and I'm going to call it test article. So I've gone ahead and opened up my test article, and the interface is pretty similar to the web app. The only difference is the reports are also presented in the top sidebar. So I've gone ahead and opened up my test article. Now I'm going to paste in a different article that's written with Markdown into ProWritingAid. So you can see it's not going to flag the Markdown formats as grammar errors. So for example, the hashtags and the stars, but it's not going to present them as rich text or formatted either. So I can edit the Markdown files, but I'm not actually going to be able to preview what Markdown looks like. Anyway, with that said, I can work through the Markdown file or text file. I don't have to use Markdown. And again, I can use the right-hand sidebar as I talked about previously. I can also just click on real time and turn that off if I find that quite distracting, or turn it back on. I can use summary to get reports or a report about my writing. This takes a few seconds to run. It's a little bit slower than some other grammar checkers. However, it will give me some information about the score for my work, whether I've achieved my goals, and I can click on each one of these to get some additional reports. So if, for example, you're an editor or a copy editor, this could be quite useful for you if you wanted to prepare a report about what you did for a client. Perhaps some of this information could be a little bit overwhelming, but it is good to see that it's there, and I haven't come across another grammar checker that goes into writing reports with this level of detail. If you're going to use the desktop app, you can start with style, and this will find some style issues that you could potentially fix. Again, you're going to click through these one by one and decide what to fix versus ignore. Next up, you're obviously going to use grammar, because it's a grammar checker, to fix all of the grammar issues. And then you can decide what grammar mistakes you want to find and fix. So you can see it's a little bit slow, so it takes a second or two. It can take a little bit longer depending on how long your article is. I also like the overused words report. This will tell me if I've overused particular words, and this can be quite good if you're writing a book, so you can see cliches in your writing. After that, there were a number of other reports. So you can check for repeated phrases, you can check for sentence structure, you can check for transition words, you can also check for readability, for sticky sentences, and you can even check for cliches. So I don't have any cliches in this article, but I do have some redundancies. So here's a redundancy here. And it's saying it's a potential redundancy. I actually think that reads okay, so I'm going to ignore that. And again, that's probably one of the strengths of ProWritingAid. There's loads here that you can use for improving the quality of your work. But perhaps it's one of the downsides as well. It can be a little bit overwhelming to work through all of these different reports if you're new to writing and editing your own work. So again, just focus on grammar and spelling issues, perhaps the readability report. And if you have a bit of time, you could look at the overused words and cliches. There is a custom dictionary as well, so you can add words to your custom dictionary. If, for example, you're using terminology or character names, and that's quite helpful too. It's pretty easy to access the custom dictionary in ProWritingAid. You can use a keyboard shortcut or the top menu. So simply open up the dictionary, and then you can start to add unusual words. So for example, character names. So here's two that I added earlier. Or phrases that maybe be specific to your industry or whatever it is that you're writing about. Now, interestingly, I did notice that sometimes the words don't appear at first. So if you close out of the dictionary and then go back in, it should appear. There's also options for creating custom rules for a style guide. I did not get as much value from this feature, but that said, I could see why it could be useful if you wanted to create rules about how your business should be described, or how some products in your company should be described, or some other terminology. So for example, instead of saying I went to Chicago University, this would change to I went to the University of Chicago. So it's up to you to decide if you want to create these rules or not. But I would like to see more sample rules that I could apply at a click rather than having to come up with them myself. That said, if you collaborate with other writers or editors, again, I could see how this could be beneficial. There are some additional reports that I use. Occasionally I will use a plagiarism checker. So to show you that in action, I'm going to delete this article and I'm going to put back in the grammar test article that I had a few moments ago. Next, I'm going to click on more reports and I'm going to look for plagiarism. Now ProWritingAid will scan the web to see if there are instances of this article being used elsewhere online. So you can see here that I have no credits remaining, so I need to purchase additional credits on ProWritingAid.com. And in this case, it's going to cost me $10 for some additional credits. So I'm going to go ahead and purchase credits so I can run a check on this article. I purchased a credit and ran a plagiarism check. It took about 2 minutes to run, so a little bit slower than some other plagiarism checkers that I've tried. You can see here that it scans against web pages, books, and academic papers. Now I have tested the plagiarism checker extensively and I found that it can be a little bit hit and miss. To show you an example, I pasted in an article that I published on my site, Become a Writer Today. I ran a plagiarism check. It took about 2 minutes to run, so it was a little bit of time to wait. And it said there were no instances of plagiarism, but I know for a fact that this article is published on my site. So perhaps this is a slight issue with the plagiarism checker. And then when I checked the same article for issues of plagiarism using Grammarly, I found that Grammarly was just a little bit faster and it did actually surface the original link, as well as some other links where this article had appeared, and I was able to use this to issue a DMCA takedown request. So while ProWritingAid is a great grammar checker, it's just a little bit slower or a little bit more unreliable as a plagiarism checker. So you can see here that it's found the links on my site and some other sites, whereas ProWritingAid did not. But that's not to take away from how good of a grammar checker it is, and I have noticed that ProWritingAid will find and fix more grammar errors than a traditional grammar checker. ProWritingAid offers plugins and add-ins for a number of writing apps, including Microsoft Word and Google Docs. You can also use it for your web browser as well. So for the purposes of this review, I went ahead and installed the ProWritingAid extension for Google Docs. And I also installed ProWritingAid for Chrome. This means that I can use ProWritingAid basically across anywhere I'm working. So now I'm going to go ahead and put in my test article into this Google Doc. Now these issues here would normally be underlined by the grammar checker in Google Docs, but ProWritingAid overwrites this and then it gives me changes that I can fix. So this is a ProWritingAid identified issue, whereas this is an issue that's identified by the grammar checker in Google Docs. If you find that confusing, you can click on extensions, click on ProWritingAid grammar checker, and then you can click on improve document. ProWritingAid will take a second to scan your work, and then you'll get access to the web app, and then you can edit it this way. Now, personally, I found this a little bit heavy-handed. If you do find it heavy-handed, you may be better off just simply using the ProWritingAid sidebar and then just clicking through your document in the same way that you would do in the web app and fixing things that way. I've opened up Gmail and I've pasted in the same article with grammar mistakes into Gmail so you can see how ProWritingAid would work. And again, it just simply underlines issues that I can fix. So in this case, it's giving me the same potential grammar and spelling errors that I should review, as well as some context behind them. Now, I found that this works quite well, and this is my preferred way to, I suppose, edit emails if I'm using ProWritingAid. ProWritingAid is a good choice as a grammar checker if you're looking for something that's affordable, but which will fix more errors than a traditional grammar checker. It's also got lots of reports that any writer and editor can use to improve the quality of their work. It's got more reports than you'll find in any other tool. In fact, that may be one of the slight downsides of ProWritingAid in that it has a little bit of a learning curve versus other grammar checkers like Grammarly. ProWritingAid also works quite well across all of the apps and writing tools that you may already use. However, it can be a little bit slower and clunkier than Grammarly, but it is more reliable than some bargain or free grammar checkers that are out there. The plagiarism checker in ProWritingAid didn't always work well for me. That said, your mileage may vary. That said, ProWritingAid is a fantastic alternative to Grammarly thanks to its price point, thanks to its accuracy, and also thanks to all of its writing reports. If you'd like to learn more about ProWritingAid, I do have an in-depth review where I go into detail about some of these features, and I'll put a link to that in the notes below this video. And finally, I also have a discount for ProWritingAid if you're interested. That is an affiliate link, meaning I earn a small commission if you decide to use it, and I'll include that in the notes as well. That said, I'm happy to recommend ProWritingAid as a good grammar checker that any writer can benefit from. And if you have questions, please let me know in the comments section below this video.